My name is Rachel Donovan and I am 30 years old. For 2 years, I built a strategy for a role I had been promised. I documented the vision. I built the operational framework. I presented the roadmap to my manager every quarter with the specific diligence of someone who believed that good work, consistently demonstrated, was sufficient evidence of readiness. I believed that because my manager, a man named Stephen Holt, had told me so. Repeatedly. Specifically. With the particular warmth of someone who knows exactly how to keep a person working hard without ever putting anything in writing. The day the VP of Growth position was announced, I was sitting in a Tuesday morning all-hands meeting in our Chicago office. 70 people. The CEO at the front of the room. And the name he said was not mine. It was a man named Derek Walsh. External hire. Effective immediately. Previously with a competitor. The CEO described him as someone who brought a fresh perspective and had impressed the entire leadership team with his vision for the function. I sat in the third row and I did not move. I kept my expression neutral the way you keep your expression neutral when your body understands something before your brain has finished processing it. I held my coffee cup with both hands. I watched Derek Walsh stand up from the front row, a seat I had not noticed anyone sitting in before the announcement, and shake the CEO's hand and say he was thrilled to be joining the team and was excited to hit the ground running. He had the cadence of someone who had prepared remarks. I went back to my desk. I opened my laptop. I opened the strategy document I had been refining for 18 months, the one titled VP Growth Roadmap, last edited by me, 4 days earlier. I stared at it for approximately 90 seconds. And then I closed it and I started going through my emails. I was not looking for anything specific. I was looking the way you look when something feels wrong and you don't yet know what you're looking for, which is the most productive kind of looking because you find things you didn't know to search for. I found it in 40 minutes. Before I take you through what I found and what I did with it over the next 3 months, tell me where you're watching from right now. Drop your city in the comments. I read every single one. Subscribe to Karma Archives before we keep going because what I found in those 40 minutes of looking is the part that changes every single thing that came after. Now let me take you back 2 years, to the beginning of the promise that was never a promise. I had joined the company, a mid-sized e-commerce technology firm called Orion Digital, at 27 as a senior growth manager. It was a good role at a good company at the right moment in my career, and I had been recruited into it specifically by Stephen Holt, who was then the VP of Growth and who had told me in the interview that he was building a team that could eventually run the function independently. He said he was looking for someone with the potential to grow into leadership. He said the path was there for the right person. I believed him because the evidence supported the belief. He gave me significant responsibility from the beginning. He included me in strategic conversations that most senior managers would not include someone at my level in. He forwarded my work to the CEO on 2 separate occasions with notes that described it as exceptional. He told me, in my 18-month review, that the VP role was being restructured and that he had recommended me internally as the strongest candidate for the expanded position. He said, "You're building exactly the right case, Rachel. Keep doing what you're doing." I kept doing what I was doing. I built a growth strategy roadmap, a comprehensive document that outlined the department's 3-year vision, the key initiative pillars, the measurement framework, the resource requirements, and the competitive positioning rationale. It was 47 pages. I had spent 4 months on it. I had shared it with Stephen in draft form 3 times, incorporated his feedback each time, and produced a final version that he had called the most rigorous strategic document this function has ever produced. He had asked me to send it to him in an editable format so he could share it with the executive team for their review. I sent it. Of course I sent it. He was my manager and I trusted him, and the document was exactly what he had asked for. That was in October. Derek Walsh was announced as VP of Growth in February. The emails I found 40 minutes after the announcement told me exactly what had happened between October and February. The email chain began on November 3rd, 16 days after I had sent Stephen the editable strategy document. It was a thread between Stephen and a recruiting firm, initiated by Stephen, describing the VP of Growth role and asking them to begin a confidential search for external candidates. The description of the role's requirements, the specific skills, the strategic priorities, the initiative pillars the incoming VP would need to understand and drive, was written in language that was, in multiple phrases across 3 paragraphs, lifted directly from my document. Not paraphrased. Directly quoted. The competitive positioning section. The measurement framework language. The 3-year vision structure. He had used my strategy document to write the job description for the role he had told me I was being considered for. The chain continued through December and January. There were 5 messages in the thread from Stephen to Derek Walsh, directly emails, in which Stephen shared materials with the external candidate to help him get up to speed on the function's direction. Among the materials he shared was a document titled VP Growth Roadmap Q4 Final. That was my document. With my work. Sent to a man who was being considered for a job I had been building toward for 2 years. Sent so that Derek Walsh could walk into his interviews knowing what I had built. Sent so that the ideas he presented to the executive team as his fresh perspective were my ideas, already refined through 18 months of my work. Presented by a man with none of that context and none of that history and a salary negotiation that was probably significantly higher than what they had planned to offer me. I read the email chain 3 times. Then I opened a new document and I copied the entire thread into it with timestamps preserved. I titled it one line. Everything. In order. With dates. Then I went to the bathroom, ran cold water over my wrists, and looked at my own face in the mirror for about 30 seconds. And then I went back to my desk and kept working, because it was a Tuesday and I still had deliverables due that week, and because I had learned, from watching the people I respected most in professional environments, that the worst time to make a significant decision is the moment you discover you need to make one. I gave myself 48 hours. I went home. I made dinner. I called my sister and I did not tell her what I had found because I needed to think before I spoke, and speaking would have moved the thinking faster than I wanted it to go. I slept, which surprised me. And in the morning I made coffee and I sat at my kitchen table and I thought through what I had and what I needed and what I was going to do with it, in exactly that order. What I had, a complete email chain documenting the confidential external search initiated 16 days after I submitted my strategy document, the transfer of that document to the external candidate, and the timeline of events that had produced the Tuesday announcement. What I needed, to understand whether what I was looking at was a legal matter, an HR matter, or both, and in what order to address each. What I was going to do, call an employment attorney before I said a single word to anyone at Orion Digital. The attorney's name was Jennifer Park. Employment law, workplace retaliation, discrimination, wrongful conduct. She had been recommended to me by a friend who had used her for a non-compete dispute the previous year and described her as someone who asked very few questions before she understood the situation and asked very precise ones after. I called her Thursday morning from my car in a parking garage 3 blocks from the office because I was not going to make this call at my desk or at home where I might be overheard. She answered on the second ring. I told her what I had found and how I had found it. She asked 3 questions. Whether I had documentation of Stephen's promises about the VP role. Whether I had a record of sharing the strategy document with him and when. And whether the emails I had found were ones I had legitimate access to, meaning they had been shared with me in the normal course of my work, not accessed through any means that would compromise my position. I said yes to the first 2. On the third I explained, the email chain had been in my inbox because I had been CC'd on the original recruiting firm introduction, not the subsequent messages, but the first one, which gave me access to the full thread history. It had been in my inbox since November 3rd. I simply had not noticed it until Tuesday. Jennifer was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Rachel, what you're describing is potentially actionable on multiple grounds. The misappropriation of your work product for a competitive hiring process is the clearest issue. Depending on the specifics of the surrounding circumstances, your gender, the fact that the role went to an external male candidate, there may also be Title VII implications worth examining. But before we go anywhere near litigation, I want to look at the documents. I sent her everything that afternoon. She reviewed the package over the weekend. She called me Monday morning and said, this is one of the cleaner cases of work product misappropriation I have seen in a professional setting. The timeline is explicit, the document transfer is documented in writing by the person who did it, and the language correlation between your strategy document and the role description is direct enough that I would put the odds of this being coincidental at approximately 0. I asked her what she recommended. She said, we don't go to court first. We go to the CEO. I said, not HR. She said, HR reports to leadership. The CEO is leadership. If the CEO is presented with this documentation directly, properly, professionally, with legal representation present, they have 2 choices. They can address it, or they can allow it to become a lawsuit that will be significantly more expensive and significantly more public than addressing it. In my experience, most CEOs make the sensible choice when presented with clear documentation of what has happened and a clear articulation of the alternative. I asked what addressing it looked like. She said, that depends on what you want. What do you want, Rachel? I thought about it for a moment. I had spent 2 years building a strategy for a role. The strategy existed. The work existed. The right outcome was the one in which the work produced the result it was designed to produce, not for Derek Walsh, who had not done it, but for the person who had. I said, I want the VP role. And I want it to be because of the work, not because of the lawsuit. Jennifer said, then let's make that case. The meeting with the CEO was scheduled for a Thursday morning 3 weeks after the announcement. Jennifer attended as my legal representative, which I had the right to bring to any meeting concerning my employment under the company's own HR policy, a policy I had read 17 times in the preceding 3 weeks. The CEO's name was Marcus Chin, and he had built Orion Digital from a startup over 11 years, which meant he understood organizations the way people who build things understand them, at the structural level, in terms of what holds and what doesn't. I want to tell you about the 48 hours before that meeting because I think they are the most honest part of this story. I had not slept well. Not from anxiety exactly. I had done everything in the right order. I had strong documentation. I had an attorney I trusted. I had the specific clarity that comes from knowing you have done nothing wrong and are prepared to demonstrate it. What kept me awake was something older and less manageable than anxiety. It was the specific grief of having trusted someone who had used that trust strategically. Stephen Holt had not just failed to give me the role. He had extracted 2 years of my thinking and used it to make someone else look ready for the role I had prepared for. He had taken the thing I built and handed it to the person who replaced me with it. That was not a career disappointment. It was something more personal than that, and I want to be honest about the fact that the personal dimension of it cost me sleep in ways the professional dimension did not. I also want to tell you about something I did in those 48 hours that I have not told many people. I went back through my work. All of it. The 18 months of strategy documents, the quarterly roadmaps, the presentation decks, the measurement frameworks, the competitive analyses, the team structure proposals. I did not do this to build the case. Jennifer had already done that. I did it because I needed to remember that the work was real, that it was mine, that it existed independently of what had been done with it and independently of the outcome of what was about to happen. The work did not become less mine because someone had taken it. I needed to sit with that before I walked into a room to fight for it. Have you ever had to remind yourself that something you built was yours, not as a legal argument, but as a human truth, before you were ready to argue for it professionally? Drop a comment and tell me. I read every single one. Subscribe to Karma Archives right now because the Thursday meeting is the part where everything turns, and that section is the one that people message me about most. Now back to the conference room. Marcus Chin was already in the conference room when Jennifer and I arrived. His general counsel was present. No one from HR. Which told me, before a word was spoken, that Marcus had reviewed whatever he had been told about the meeting's purpose and had decided this was a leadership conversation, not a process one. Jennifer presented the documentation package in 20 minutes. She did not editorialize. She did not frame it as an accusation or a legal threat. She presented it as a factual account, in chronological order, of what the documentation showed. The strategy document, dated and attributed. The email chain, timestamped. The language correlation between my document and the role description, highlighted side by side. The emails sharing my document with Derek Walsh during the candidate evaluation period. Marcus did not interrupt. He read what was placed in front of him with the focused attention of someone who knows how to process difficult information without reacting to it prematurely. When Jennifer finished, he looked at the documents for another 30 seconds. Then he looked at me. He said, Rachel, I want to ask you something directly, and I need you to answer it the same way. I said I would. He said, is it your position that you were the right candidate for this role on the merits, independent of what Stephen did, or is this primarily about what was done with your work? I said, both. I believe I was the right candidate. I also believe the process was corrupted in a way that made it impossible to evaluate that fairly. And I believe the person who is currently in the role was prepared for his interviews using materials I produced, which means his fresh perspective was built on my 2 years of work. Marcus looked at the general counsel. Then he looked back at me. He said, give me 72 hours. Stephen Holt was placed on administrative leave 70 hours after that meeting. The announcement was internal, no explanation given, the standard language of someone stepping back pending review. I know the timeline because I was watching, and because in any office of 70 people, internal developments of significance travel faster than formal communications. Derek Walsh was terminated before his 3rd week was complete. I know this because I was told directly in a follow-up conversation with Marcus Chin that occurred on the Friday of the same week, in which he told me that the company had determined Derek's hiring process had been conducted in a manner inconsistent with the company's standards and that the position was being reevaluated. He asked me to come in on Monday. I came in on Monday. Jennifer was with me. The meeting lasted 45 minutes. Marcus offered me the VP of Growth role. He offered a compensation package that reflected the seniority of the position, including equity. He acknowledged, directly and without corporate language softening it, that what Stephen had done was wrong, that I had been treated unfairly, and that the company wanted to make it right in the most direct way available to them. He also told me that Stephen Holt's employment had been terminated, effective that morning, and that the circumstances of his departure had been documented in his personnel file in ways that would follow him in any future reference check. I accepted the offer. I want to be honest about why I accepted it rather than continuing to litigation. Jennifer had told me the lawsuit had merit and would likely produce a financial settlement. What it would not produce was the role. The work I had spent 2 years building deserved to be implemented by the person who had built it. The lawsuit would have given me money. The Monday meeting gave me the chance to actually do the thing I had spent 2 years preparing to do. I chose the work. I have been VP of Growth at Orion Digital for 14 months. The 3-year roadmap I built is in its 2nd year of implementation. The metrics are ahead of projection in 2 of 3 initiative pillars and on track in the 3rd. I have a team of 11 people who know that their work is attributed to them and that their ideas are documented under their names and that their manager is someone who understands, from direct experience, exactly what it costs when that is not true. Stephen Holt has not worked in the industry since his termination. His LinkedIn is sparse in the way that LinkedIn profiles become sparse when the details of a departure are not ones a person wants to explain. I am aware of his general situation the way you are aware of things in a professional community that is smaller than it appears, not because I seek the information, but because it finds you when you work in the same city in the same sector. I do not think about him often. I think about the work. Derek Walsh sent me a LinkedIn connection request 4 months after his termination. I declined. I do not owe him my network. There is one thing I want to tell you before I close this story, because it is the part that I keep coming back to when I think about what the last 2 years have actually meant. The work was real. That is the thing I went back to in those 48 hours before the Thursday meeting, when I needed to remind myself of something that the circumstances were trying to make me doubt. The strategy document was 47 pages of real thinking, real research, real analysis. The roadmap was built from 18 months of observation, experimentation, and refinement. None of that became less real when someone took it. None of it became less mine. The misappropriation was a fact. The work was also a fact. And in the end, the work was the more powerful one, because it was the thing that made the argument irrefutable. Not just to the attorneys and the CEO, but to me. You are not the credit you receive for what you build. You are what you built. And if you have documented it, if you have the timestamps, the email chains, the version histories, the 47 pages with your name in the metadata, then what you built is also what you can prove. Keep the documentation. Always. Not because you expect to need it. Because the day you need it, you will not have time to wish you had started earlier. Leave a comment and tell me, have you ever had someone take your work and your opportunity at the same time? Or have you ever stayed quiet about something that was done to you at work because you didn't know you had options? I want to hear it. Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. Subscribe to Karma Archives. Every single day there is a new story like this one. True workplace betrayal, real American workplace drama, family betrayal, satisfying endings, r/ProRevenge style, narrated daily for people who believe the truth deserves to win. Karma always has more to say. And the work always outlasts the person who tried to take it. Subscribe. I'll see you next time.